Hello and welcome back to the second episode of our series on fintech. And Ralf Ohlhausen, the chair of ETPPA, made some rather interesting comments last time that when the regulation came out for open banking, there were some surprises in there, something you didn't really like. Can you give us a few examples of what those were?
Well, it was much too many for our taste. So as I said last time, when I first read this RTS, I could not believe my eyes, honestly. I was just gobsmacked. I felt that it basically turned upside down what I thought we had agreed after over many years, and a lot of discussion back and forth with PSD2. So this was reflecting an interpretation of PSD2, which was basically completely different, with many issues. For example, one thing that was, of course, a big one for us is that the banks were given a choice of providing either a dedicated new interface, API-based, or allowing access through one of their user interfaces. And of course, our expectation would have been that that this choice would be reciprocated, so that we could then use also one or the other, depending on what is better or what is more useful for us. Of course, with the trend towards the API, machine to machine, which is what we do. So that is what our expectation was. But relying solely on that would have been opening that for abuse. So we always, at the time we came up with this, or Arturo was actually coming up with this analogy that we can't have just a building here that relies entirely on a lift. So you still need staircases for the case something goes wrong. And that's what was one thing. So that we said, okay, there must be a fallback, there must be something in place that just works based on those user interfaces that we've been using all the way up to that point as I said, 15 years before. And then also the other big one was about redirection, which we felt must be clearly stated as an obstacle, and the Commission at the time confirmed that. Of course, if you redirect to the bank to enter your credentials in there, then you don't really need to license TPPs at all, because the main reason for licensing was to make sure that they are secure, they are supervised, they have the systems in place, they get audited, all of that, so that they can handle user credentials properly and safely. So that was one of the main interests. And when we then saw that, we wouldn't have that possibility. We would now always have to the bank would come into the middle of our user flow. We thought, that can't be. We need end-to-end responsibility for the user experience. And so we made sure that this redirection was rejected there as a sole possibility.
Okay, so those are two very important topics. We're already delving very deep into the technical area, but I mean, as I understand it, you had been working with the regulator long before the regulation came out, and there was an understanding that the fintechs would get a choice of access, just like the banks have a choice of whether they want to provide APIs or direct access. And then it turned out to be not quite symmetrical. So I think I understand that with this exception ruling that you weren't too happy with that. But despite that, I think you are still in favor of the APIs, right? You don't want to sit on screen scraping, or am I wrong?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we are our work is based on machine-to-machine interaction. So we are not the end user themselves. We are not manually, doing anything through a user interface. We're doing this with a machine to machine, and it's a pain going through an HTTP user interface, like the online user interface. With that, it is much better, or it's different, say, for mobile, because the mobile apps are using a mobile API. So the mobile interface is actually API based, and so that is Therefore, basically, we can handle that in the same way as we would handle a TPP dedicated API. And by the way, of course, this is if every bank would just use their mobile API for TPPs, then I think everything would be fine.
Okay. So I think your mantra is, if I understand you right, is API first. You love APIs, but there has to be an alternative if they're not working properly. To stay with Arturo's example, if the lift is broken, it's good to have the stairs.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, there are several reasons for it, actually. I mean, one is that even the best API will fail one day. So you always we need a fallback. You need redundancy. And given that the whole idea was to have, non-discrimination between the bank's own interfaces and going via TPP, of course, the perfect thing is that if that was the same interface, so if it was, say, the same mobile API, as an example, if that was used for TPPs or accessible for TPPs, documented, then that would basically provide all of that in by itself. Yeah. So the problem is, once you get a dedicated interface for TPPs, which many banks see as competitors, then, and if that then gets a monopoly situation by giving an exemption, and so that we cannot have any fallback to anything else. So if we have to go through, if there is no choice, then, well, that kills quality, as we know. So choice is what enables quality.
I mean, one thing I've always been hoping for in this open banking space is that banks see more and more that it's actually to their advantage also to open up. It's not just for the benefit of fintechs, it's for the benefit of consumers and merchants and their own interests to open up. And then surely they will be motivated to provide good APIs. And that's a topic we'll explore in another series. But I do want to come back to the other point you raised initially, where you said the user journey was being disrupted with the way the regulation had come out. I mean, the SCA is an incredibly complex legislation. I think it's 6 chapters, which I think is a mistake anyway. It's far too prescriptive. So can you describe the problem that was generated there and how you would see the optimal solution?
Yeah, and maybe just to say that once we had put our protest there into the commission in Brussels and explained what is wrong with this RTS and how it has to be improved, we actually had a quite good interim version of this there. But then, unfortunately, all the bank lobby came in and we moved fast. So, for example, we had this fallback there, but that was then qualified by there must be an exemption from giving the fallback, and we had in there that redirection is an obstacle, and then in the end it turned out it may or may not be an obstacle, and so we still have the final RTS that we have in place has still a lot to be desired, and one thing is about that redirection. Now, there are good ways of redirection, so don't get me wrong, in particular on a mobile app to app, very useful and can work very well. It is not something that we don't want necessarily, but it is something that should not be, and again, could not be the only way of doing it. Because if redirection is in a monopoly situation, you have no other choice, then that opens up the door for banks to abuse it and to put not just 1 or 2 screens there, but to put 15 or 21, actually, as we have seen with one bank in Italy, for example. I mean, that, of course, then kills the whole use case. You can't offer any AIS or PIS services with so many clicks through. So maybe worthwhile remembering that prior to PSD2, if you're using a PIS, you enter your credentials there, and that's all you see. You click a button. It's one screen, one click. That is it. and all the rest happens in the background, and it always happens securely, by the way, and now being licensed, etc., even more securely. And but what we now have in most cases, we have a series of screens and clicks to go through, some of which are having some discouraging language by the bank of, are you really sure you want to do this? And so it is, of course, I mean, the user interface also being the main thing also for innovation, and of course one of the main elements of any service. So we got to have that end-to-end responsibility and ability to make that the best possible.
Yeah, I mean, some people listening to this might find that surprising, because you would think, everybody would have an interest in having a smooth user journey. Of course you do, right? The consumer doesn't want to go through 17 redirections and different screens, and the fintechs.
Well, you mentioned more and more banks are seeing the advantage, which is true. I wish there were even more, or this was faster. So we have indeed a number of banks who see PSD2 as an opportunity. But we have, I guess, overall a larger number who see it as a threat to their business, who are trying to, limit it, to use the API as a bottleneck, to make the user flow not very nice. So basically discouraging their customers from using anyone else rather than themselves for any service.
Well, that's sad to hear that that's the majority, but we will in this series also be talking to a number of banks who do see the advantage of opening up and using APIs, and why that's actually good for them and for everybody else. So maybe that'll help encourage the others. Anyway, Ralf, I thank you very much also for those insights. We will continue with lots of other topics, but thanks for at least giving a first insight on what problems you had with the regulation, which were really very, very interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.